Hi. Good morning. This is Tuesday, March 8, 2022. The Insurance Committee of the Tennessee House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly is now in session. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Representatives Carr, Sapicki, Freeman, Hawk, Hicks, Hodges, Johnson, Lafferty, Mitchell, Powers, Rudd, Terry, Thompson, White, Vice Chair Rudder. Here. Chairman Kumar.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Members, do we have any personal orders? Want to welcome Vice Chair Rudder back. Thank you. Chairman Terry.
Thank you. I have a student that I'd like to recognize with the Tennessee Eagle Forum, Ethan Weber, if you guys can thank him for joining us.
We are also pleased to welcome Miss Olivia White and her dad, Jason. Olivia is a senior student at Dayspring Academy in Robertson County, a wonderful school, and Olivia is the valedictorian. Representative Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got my daughter Sage here with me today, so just welcome her, please.
Any other personal orders, members? Seeing none, we'll proceed with our calendar. We have 6 bills on the calendar. The first of which is House Bill 2661 by Speaker Sexton, carried and co-sponsored by Chairman Spickey. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Spickey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll be working off an amendment on this. It's 014488. It does make the bill.
May I have a motion on the amendment?
No?
The motion is to attach the amendment to the bill, and then Chairman will explain to us the amended bill. Let's see, where is the amendment number?
No. I don't have it. Okay, I don't have it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
can I ask, could you roll me 2 spots, please? I got to get the amendment. I don't have the new amendment.
Okay. Without objection, roll 2 spots. Item 2 on our calendar. House Bill 0677 by Representative Hall. Representative Hall, you recognize. May I have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Mr. Chairman, historically, in the past, if a patient was diagnosed with a disease, he would have to follow a regimen and a protocol of substandards and ineffective drugs. House Bill 677 changes all of that, basically puts the patient in the best chance of success. It allows the physician and the patient to determine their best source of treatment. This bill is passed in 30 other states. It does have a fiscal note of which we're having a concentrated effort on working on, but this bill, House Bill 677, will change more people's lives in this state than any other bill drafted this year. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I renew my motion.
Thank you, Representative Hall. Just to add context to it, the point being that patients, when they are being treated, they're expected to move in a stepwise fashion, and that is called step therapy. The idea being to take the standard less expensive drugs first, which they're standard and less expensive because they've been around a while, they're safe, and they will help most patients. However, some patients in whom step 1 and step 2 drugs do not help go through unnecessary suffering, in the sense that they have to go through those courses before getting the drug that they need. This bill, I believe, will make it possible for the physician to move beyond step therapy when, in the physician's judgment, this is so indicated. And yes, it will add expense to the matter, but at the same time, it will help the patient, which is the main purpose that physicians are there and our constituents whom we are here to help. Members, do we have any questions? I stand corrected. There is an amendment 13781 that we need to attach. We have a motion and second to attach the amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment goes on the bill. Representative Hall, you're recognized on the amended bill.
I have nothing else to add unless there's any more questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized.
Okay, yes, thank you, Representative Hall. Just a couple of questions. When we're going from, in the step therapy, when you're going from one company to another, and you've already been through the step therapy, and you're going to this other company, and I'm not sure, why would there be a note? Why would that be an increase in cost? If you, say you went all the way through, you went through drug A and you got to drug E, and the other company picks it up and they start covering drug E at that point, rather than putting you through the step therapy again, why would there be a cost associated with that?
Representative Hall, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a great question, and that's been our battle cry all along, is that we think it's going to be cost avoidance
That's what
due to the fact that we're bypassing ineffective and inefficient drugs and going straight. But more important than the cost, it prohibits the disease from progressing 6 months to a year down the road. So I think, although cost is certainly a factor, I think the fact that you're containing the disease with the most effective treatment is really the battle cry that I'm here today for.
Okay.
Chairman Powers?
Yeah, it just looks like if you had already been through the step therapy and you got to this drug and you went to another company, it doesn't look like that would, be an increase in cost. And that was the reason I brought it up. Another thing too, would this also include if you went from one doctor to another? Say my doctor retired and I had already been through the step therapy program, and when I changed to another doctor, would I have to go through that again, or is that included in the bill?
Representative Hall, you're recognized.
You could go straight to the specialist and address your disease in the most efficient and effective way, almost immediately.
Okay.
Chairman Powers?
So, okay, yeah. So they're going from step therapy. This would also include like going from one doctor to another. If you had to change doctors for some reason, if they retire or whatever, then it would include that too. Correct.
Representative Hall?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Hall, I just had a question, and I support your bill, but where it's talking about requires insurer step therapy protocols for prescription drugs. Is it only prescription drugs? I know in pain management, sometimes the drug is not the answer. Maybe the implantation of electrode or something for, electrical shock.
Representative Hall?
Chairman White, either fortunately or unfortunately, normally the prescription drugs are the most effective. So to bypass the substandard and ineffective drugs and going straight to the most efficient treatment, whatever that may be.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Representative Hall, I mean, I support the concept of what you're doing here, but could you just let me know that does your amendment, in an effort to cut the fiscal note, exclude TennCare patients?
Representative Hall.
That is correct. It does cut out TennCare for the simple fact that we had to get the physical note in a very manageable position. Now, after having said that, once step therapy is proven to be effective and has a track record, then we can build upon that.
Representative Mitchell.
I mean, but that simply pains me that we're going to pick winners and losers, and the least among us, again, are going to be the losers as normal. And we know how to fix healthcare in this state or attempt to fix it, and we just refuse to do it in this state.
Representative Hall.
You make a very valid point, but I respectfully disagree, and this is why. Is once step therapy is proven, once it's proven and it has a track record of years of success, it becomes an easier sell to build upon your foundation once it's in place. To swing for the fence and completely miss is still 100% ineffective. So this gives us hope. This gives us a base to build off of for a more efficient and effective future for our patients.
Representative Mitchell.
If you can tell me what I'm supposed to tell that TennCare patient in my district that they need this to make it, if you can give me a good response, I can tell them, I may change my mind.
Representative Hall.
Chairman Mitchell, I wish medicine was a one-size-fits-all. Unfortunately, it is not. But however, I feel like that we need to benefit whoever we can benefit in this great state of Tennessee, whatever that looks like.
Thank you, Representative Hall. I think I would like to add the fact that certainly this is a half a step. And yes, TennCare enrollees would not benefit from this bill, but certainly it is on our mind. It is on, thank you for reminding us that that is a gap in medical care for Tennessean. And I think we will work towards it. And it's a matter of, again, arranging funding so that everybody can benefit. I think that should really be our ultimate goal. Members, any other questions? Seeing none, we are voting on House Bill 0677. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? The bill moves on to Government Operations Committee. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and
Representative
committee,
Hall.
thank you.
Next on our agenda is item 3, House Bill 2544 by Representative Alexander. We have a motion and a second. Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee. This House bill does have an amendment to it.
Yes, we see amendment 014197.
That is correct.
Members, we have a motion and second on attaching amendment 14197 to House Bill 2544. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? The amendment goes on the bill. You're recognized on the amended bill.
Okay. The original law was passed in 1989. This is concerning insurance coverage on mammograms. And this bill will update the statute to better reflect all the technology that is utilized for breast imaging now and for cancer screenings today. The passage of this bill, patients will have access to all low-dose mammography services, including breast tomosynthesis, which is 3D imaging, digital mammography, and X-ray. The bill also includes coverage of supplemental and diagnostic screenings utilizing MRI and ultrasounds when necessary. For women with a personal history, like myself, dense breast, grandmother had breast cancer, aunt had breast cancer, cousins had breast cancer. If I had had this, I might not have had to go through a double mastectomy that I did. I will tell you that over 5,000 women got breast cancer last year. 1,000 of them, 1,070 of them died in 2021. This is a serious thing for our state. And I just ask that you consider this bill.
Thank you, Representative Alexander, and thank you for, as I said before, opening your heart and sharing this with us. It certainly is a very major screening effort in our society. And yes, screening for breast cancer does save lives. Members, do we have any questions? I think everybody's convinced that this is a good deed. Okay. We are, without objection, we are voting on House Bill 2544. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The bill moves on to Finance Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Next item, I think speaking to him. All right. So thank you, Chairman Speaker. You're just in time. We are ready to take up House Bill 2661. Can I have a motion and a second again? We have a motion and a second, and you have an amendment.
We do, sir. Thank you for being patient with us. It is 014713.
Okay, may I have a motion and a second on the amendment? Thank you. We are voting on attaching amendment 014713 to House Bill 2661. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Amendment goes on the bill. You're recognized on the amended bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members, for being patient with us. Last year, we passed historic PBM reform legislation, and one of the intents of that legislation was for pharmacies to be reimbursed no less than the actual cost of a drug or device dispensed to a person. During the summer, it came to our attention that due to a definition issue, that intent wasn't realized in the legislation. The bill today fixes that definition and ensures that pharmacies or a pharmacist will be reimbursed no less than the actual cost. While working on the bill this summer, we did find multiple loopholes in the law that would have allowed PBMs to circumvent the intent of last year's legislation. This bill will also close those loopholes, like stopping PBMs from reducing a dispensing fee to offset reimbursing at actual cost for a drug or device, or a PBM from charging a pharmacy an additional amount to process a claim. The bill also requires a PBM to have a reasonable appeal procedure for any pharmacy to challenge a reimbursement amount if it is less than what the pharmacy paid to acquire the drug or device, allows the Department of Commerce and Insurance to promulgate rules to allow for an external appeals process for any claim denied by a PBM, requires all PBMs to pay a pharmacy a dispensing fee at a rate not less than the amount paid by our TennCare programs, and requires that all PBMs allow participants of the PBM plan to use any pharmacy within the state that is licensed to dispense the drug or device, as long as the pharmacy agrees to accept the same terms and conditions that the PBM has established for at least one of its networks. And one of the clarifying languages in the amendment, Mr. Chairman and members, is it clarifies that the external appeals process created by the Department of Commerce and Insurance must be done using existing resources there, so there'll be no charge to anybody else. That's what the bill does, members, and I renew my motion.
Thank you. Members, you have any questions? Representative Mitchell, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So in this bill, are you codifying dispensing fees?
Chairman speaker.
Yes, sir. They would be no less than what TennCare pays.
So, yeah, I think we talked about this in subcommittee. That's increasing the cost of healthcare in Tennessee. You realize that.
Chairman
And it's price fixing.
Chairman speaker.
Well, I would argue with you that it's not increasing the cost of healthcare because there's nothing in the bill that says that the PBMs or any business has to pass that on to the consumer. There's nothing in there that says they have to do that. That would be a policy decision on their part.
Representative.
And what do you think 99.9% of businesses will do?
Chairman speaker.
Well, I'm not here to speak for those businesses. That'd be an individual decision that their board of directors would make.
So like I said, in essence, you're raising the cost of healthcare in Tennessee on Tennesseans.
Chairman speaker.
Mr. Chairman, once again, I would ask any member here to show me where it says that we're raising the cost of healthcare in Tennessee.
Representative Mitchell.
Because you are setting the price of the dispensing fees, and the dispensing fees are a whole lot less in a lot of self-funded health plans in this state currently. And those fees, your fees are more than double what the dispensing fee is on a lot of health plans in this state. And it's going to cost a whole lot more money for health plans. And of course, that employer is going to bring that cost down on his employees. They're going to have to pay more. In essence, you're going to raise the premium of Tennesseans.
Chairman speaker.
Once again, that'd be a business decision by those individuals.
Members, does anybody else want to jump in the debate? Yes. Chairman Terry, you recognize.
Thank you, Chairman. To that same point, currently, if pharmacies aren't able to recoup what their cost of the drug is, and we have altering these dispensing fees, or at least, I mean, let's be honest, TennCare's rates are low, very low to begin with. But if independent pharmacies aren't able to compete, then it's eventually we're going to be cutting out the competition. You're going to end up with a monopoly who at that point, they can price fix at a higher cost, which in turn would increase the cost of healthcare in Tennessee. And this is helping to prevent that. Is that correct?
Chairman speaker.
Absolutely, Chairman.
Thank you.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's a difference between, if we want to codify the cost of the drugs, reimbursing for the amount that the drug cost versus codifying the amount of the dispensing fee. That's two totally different things. If we want to go to codifying the price of the drugs, that's a level playing field for everyone. But when you're codifying the dispensing fee, you're increasing the cost of health care.
Chairman speaker.
Renew my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Just to cover the fact and the reason that you brought this bill, we are taking care of the major problems and complaints that we were faced with. That is the pharmacies, small town pharmacies getting paid below their cost. That is resolved. One issue, the other issue that stands out also is about the PBMs and the rebates that they receive. We were hoping for transparency of those. Where does this bill stand on that?
Ooh, that's a great question, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if this bill addresses that at all.
Thank you. Anything else? I guess we can continue to work on that one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Members, without objection, we are voting on House Bill 2661. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. The bill moves on to Government Operations Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members.
Thank you. We are moving on to item 4. Item 4 on our agenda, which is We have a motion and second on House Bill 0685 by Representative Beck. Uh,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a amendment for the bill, and I have,
014791.
that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the amendment to attach the amendment to the bill. The bill is 0685. All those in favor of attaching the amendment, please say aye. Opposed? The amendment goes on the bill. Mr. Representative, you're recognized on the amended bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If for those of y'all who were here last week, this is one of my gig economy bills where we're saying that Sam, if you're delivering pizzas for Sam's Pizza Hut, that you, Sam, if he does not provide insurance for you while you're running a commercial endeavor, that all Sam has to do is notify you that your insurance may not cover your commercial endeavors and to contact your insurance agent for further explanation so that they can buy a commercial policy instead of having an accident with their personal policy and being denied and having no coverage. So it's a simple notification. I thank the committee for their recommendations last week on this amendment. I think it is much better that we have a written acknowledgement so there's no he said, she said as to if they were notified at the time of their employment. With that, Mr. Chairman, I stand ready to take questions.
Members, do you have questions? Chairman Powers?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the sponsor for working on this and getting it amended. I really think this is a good bill. Being in the property and casualty insurance business, I run into this all the time. And, if somebody had an agreement with one company and they go to work for another company, they may not have that same agreement. And this is going to take care of that. And so many people have an accident and don't find out until after that they don't have coverage for their commercial activity. So I appreciate you bringing this bill forward, and I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you,
other
Mr.
questions?
Chairman Powers.
Any other questions, members? Well, thank you, Representative Beck. It seems to be well received. We are voting on House Bill 0685. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Our next item is number 5, House Bill 1941. We have a motion and a second, and we also have amendments on that.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to run the amendment with it. I want it to remain without the amendment, and I'll explain why.
Okay. You're recognized on House Bill 1941.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. This is another gig economy and safety for our consumers. In Tennessee, wisely, when rideshare companies such as Uber and Lyft came into the state of Tennessee, they said, you're not going to be regulated by any taxi cab companies. You're not going to be regulated by anyone, but we want you to have $1 million in liability insurance. At that time, they did not make any requirement for uninsured motorist insurance carrier limits. So at this point in time, we have commercial carriers who do not have any requirements for UIM coverage. If you are hit while in a common carrier and have no insurance, which I have to tell you, 40% of kids going to college have no driver's license. So they would have no insurance. So if they're hit by an uninsured motorist, there's no coverage for them. Now, the ride shares have come to see me and said, well, we've got $15,000 in med pay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, have y'all been to the emergency room lately? That is an emergency room visit after you have your scans and your x-rays and other modalities. So In subcommittee, there was a little heartburn on the committee about what was taxis insurance coverage. And I told the committee honestly at that point in time, I did not know. Well, I've since done the research and taxis are 5,100. And that's 50,000 per person, 100 per accident, as I feel sure Chairman Powers can explain what that all means. But I did want to put in subcommittee several of the members did not want the rideshare companies to be treated different from the common carriers or the commercial carriers of taxis. Even though taxis are highly regulated, their medallions can be taken away, et cetera, and punished. Whereas with Uber, they're self-policing. So we're relying on the company to self-police. So I'm going to remove the amendment that raised it to $1 million for uninsured motorists, which I think is very reasonable. But we'll go with what the original bill said, which was 50,000 per person or 100,000 per accident. But I will have to say that next year I'm going to come back and look at all commercial carriers because I feel that when you or I or my child gets into one of these commercial carriers, they need to make sure that they are safe and they are covered from, and also the driver, if you think about it, the driver has no uninsured motorist for an injury from an uninsured motorist because, again, we go back to personal policy. If he has a personal policy with UIM on it, it's not valid if he's in the middle of a commercial enterprise. So, long story short, I told the committee that I would look into, I promised the committee that I would look into what taxi cabs were. I think the committee was not interested in putting more on the ride share than on the taxi cab companies, and thus I'm making them equal at 50-10. But next year I may come back and make us even more safe. With that, Mr. Chairman, I stand ready to take questions.
Members, do you have questions? Chairman White?
Thank you, Chairman. So Representative Beck, I'm trying to understand exactly what we're doing now. So current law is the 50, 100, 25. You have to have primary insurance. Are you in an additional coverage under this, for the TNCs?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right now, there is no law for ride shares as to what they have to cover for uninsured motorists. Their liability is $1 million, but uninsured motorists is not mentioned. Now, whether that was, I think that was oversight when they passed the law, but we're just requiring them. You, as an individual in the state of Tennessee, your liability requirement is $2,550. That's minimum in the great state of Tennessee, with $10,000 in property damage. Now, I'm not an insurance agent, so if I'm misquoting, we have insurance agents on the committee here. So what we're saying is that as a common carrier for ride share, that you're going to have a minimum of 50,000 insurance, 50,000 per person, or 100,000 per accident.
Chairman White?
Thank you, Chairman. That's all.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the sponsor, the thing about currently, so you're talking about when they're engaged only. So is there any, or you're not trying to increase the requirement when they're not engaged in the ride share, when the app's not on, when they're in their own personal vehicle because they're an independent contractor? You're not trying to increase that at all. You're just trying to increase it when they are engaged. Is that correct?
You're recognized.
That's exactly right, Chairman Powers. And it's just like it's under the same code where the liability engages when they engage on that app. You're exactly right. And I apologize. I made that point in subcommittee, but forgot to make it in full committee. So it strictly goes to when they're in that commercial activity and hit that app.
Okay, and I'm sorry.
Chairman Powers.
And they're currently, they're all already required in their individual auto, and you're right, 25, 50, 25, they're already required to carry that for their liability. So you're only talking about uninsured motorists only then, is that correct?
You're recognized.
That's correct. The statute already puts their liability coverage at $1 million,
Right.
but it's silent as to uninsured motorists.
Chairman Powers.
Yes. The other question, well, I'm gonna have to, can I come back in a moment, please?
Sure.
Okay, I'll come back in a moment. Thank you.
We do have legal director from Uber who wants to testify. Kindly, you know the mic, introduce yourself, identify who you're with, and we will go out of session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. This is Joe Messina. I'm an attorney on the insurance legal team at Uber. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to the committee today and explain why we are opposed to this bill. There are a few points that I thought would be helpful for the committee as it considers the requirements. First, Tennessee's existing TNC insurance requirements are the result of a model bill that took several years to develop and required alignment across many different stakeholders, including legislators, insurance carriers, TNCs, and others. And Tennessee, like most other states in the country, adopted the insurance provisions within that model without any substantive revision. And that's because we believe they made sense then, they make sense now, and they're working. In accord with that statute, Uber currently maintains substantial auto liability insurance, just like other TNCs do, on behalf of drivers while operating on the app. That includes $1 million of auto liability insurance once the ride has been accepted. Now, the driver doesn't need to do anything to benefit from that insurance. As long as the driver is on the app, he or she is insured. Uber, the TNC, pays for it. The TNC maintains it on behalf of the driver. In our view, requiring TNCs to maintain any amount of uninsured motorist coverage would be punitive and unfairly prejudicial to TNCs. The fact is that every other driver, yes, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sure you think everybody knows what's TNC, but kindly explain that.
Sure, Transportation Network Company.
Okay.
Thank you. Every other driver in Tennessee is not required to maintain uninsured motorist coverage. I wasn't under the impression that taxis are required to maintain it. It's my understanding that taxis are regulated at the city or the county level. And again, it's my understanding that the vast majority, if there are any counties within the state, actually don't require this coverage of taxis. The proposed uninsured motorist coverage limits here would even be well outside the norm when you consider this on a state-by-state basis across the country. 22 states right now don't require transportation network companies to maintain this coverage at all. Only 10 states require it in significant limits, like the amounts that we're talking here. And 2 of those 10, Washington and Georgia, are currently considering bills to repeal those requirements or to substantially reduce them. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the coverage just isn't needed. Uber's claims and loss data shows that only one trip out of every 100,000 actually involves an uninsured motorist coverage claim. That means 99.999% of Uber trips don't involve an uninsured motorist claim. And to the extent that in that rare instance in which it might arise, Uber does maintain gratuitously, without any requirement under law, medical payments coverage. And that medical payments coverage is actually, in many ways, better than uninsured motorist coverage. If you're familiar with the differences, uninsured motorist coverage actually requires a determination of liability. That takes a very long time in many cases. And that's why folks consider uninsured motorist coverage claims to be very long tail. Medical payments coverage, on the other hand, actually requires no finding of fault. It's a no fault coverage. So it pays much more quickly. It gets money in the hands of claimants much more quickly. But with that, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Messina? Chairman Powers?
Thank you for coming out. How much is the med pay coverage currently on?
Mr. Messina?
$5,000 per insured. So there's not a per accident limit, it's per insured. But again, that is, not regulatorily required, is entirely gratuitous.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, because when I was visited in the office, I was told that the med pay covers up to 15,000. You recognize?
It varies by state. In Tennessee, and actually in the majority of states across the country, it's $5,000. In certain states, it's actually a required coverage under law. I'm thinking like Delaware, and there it's $15,000.
So if a person's involved in an accident because of being hit by uninsured motorists, the medical expense coverage available to them is $5,000.
It is, and that's in the rare instance, and the very rare instance that there's not any liability alleged on the part of the driver. So we're talking a very small subset of claims where 100% of the liability is alleged to be on the uninsured motorist. I mean, I think as you can understand, in the vast majority of cases, the driver is alleged to have done something wrong as well. But in that rare case, this medical payments coverage is there to respond. And like I said, that's 99.999% of the claims it does.
So liability insurance will provide additional funds for medical treatment.
It would cover the driver's liability for whatever bodily injury the driver may have caused or property damage.
Members, any other questions? Thank you. We will go back into session. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was told the 15,000 in MedPay 2 yesterday and learned today it's just 5,000. Ladies and gentlemen, again, if anybody's been to the emergency room lately, 5,000 is a couple of MRIs. That's not sufficient to cover what could happen if a drunk driver runs a red light and hits you in a vehicle and you don't have any personal uninsured motorist, and the driver has no uninsured motorist, commercial uninsured motorist. So we're protecting not only the passenger, we're protecting the driver. To hear that $50,000 in insurance is punitive is absolutely ridiculous. Each one of you look at your car, your policies. You've got uninsured motorists. We have uninsured motorists. For all those idiots out there who don't buy insurance. Again, don't buy insurance. We do not need to wait for a great tragedy to run back here to this committee and say, oh, we should have had uninsured motorists on ride shares. We need to make sure any of the insurance agents on this committee can tell you that we buy insurance for things that are unforeseen, for things that don't happen that often. So to say that this doesn't happen that often is not a defense. Ladies and gentlemen, let's don't wait for a great tragedy. This is not high limits, 50,000 per person, 100,000 per injury. And I want to go back to if they're drivers at fault, yes, you're covered under that $1 million policy. If he runs the red light and hits somebody, Uber's insurance is liable for the actions of the driver. But if the driver is innocent, only coverage that they're providing is $5,000. That does not protect our people, my family, your family. And I'd ask that we make it a requirement under law for 50,000 per person, 100,000 per accident for our families. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chairman Powers?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right now, as the sponsor knows, you're not required, if you have an individual car, you do not have to carry uninsured motorists at all in the state of Tennessee, right?
You're recognized.
That's correct. If you sign it away,
Right.
You have to sign away that you do not want uninsured motorists. You understand that you don't want uninsured motorists, and you sign it away. When you get into a rideshare car, you are not signing away your right to uninsured motorists.
Chairman Powers?
Correct. And even when you get into a rideshare car, actually, if you have uninsured motorists on your policy, you're actually covered if because I've even had people that have been hit beside of the road standing out there, and they've had by an uninsured motorist, they have coverage. So they have coverage on their own individual policy. That follows them. It's a little bit like liability that will follow them wherever they go. So they would have that type of coverage already. An individual would that was riding in that car if they had auto insurance, if they had uninsured motorist. Here's the problem I've got with the bill. Right now, we're not requiring, these are individual people, independent contractors, a little bit different from what you recall, what we were talking about with the taxi cab riders at the commercial vehicle. These are independent contractors that are doing this part-time. Some of them may be doing them full-time, but if we're not requiring a person or an individual or anybody else to carry uninsured motorists, no matter if we're driving a vehicle, we're not actually required to carry it. Like you said, we just got to sign a form that says we don't going to carry it. So I'm having a hard time making these individuals also carry that on their policy, making them pay for that. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I know we have a lot of uninsured motorists. We have more in my area than a lot of areas that claims like that. But I think it's something that we need to go back and look at, and maybe I think we need to do a little bit more work on it and try to figure out what would be the best, what would be the most uniform throughout the state or throughout the country if we're doing this for a particular reason. And so I just don't really think we're at the point right now where we need to require anyone to carry liability or uninsured motorists like that on their individual vehicles, or require the company to provide that form at this point. Maybe at some point we might be. I'm sorry.
You recognize?
Thank you. First of all, on the independent contractor, this is not on the driver. This is on the company,
I know.
just like the $1 million policy is when they
Right.
hit that app. Number two, the driver is an independent contractor, but he will not be covered under his uninsured motorist because he's in the middle, just like the last bill, he's in the middle of a commercial activity.
Mhm.
If he gets hit in the door by an uninsured motorist, there's no coverage for him. No coverage. So I think that's unjust and unright. He's out there driving and for a company to help them make money, to help him make money. The people in the back seat, like I said, 40% of kids that go into college don't have a driver's license. If you don't have a driver's license, you're not covered under anybody's policy. You don't have your own policy. We need to make sure that when, just like an innkeeper, that you are safe. They have a higher duty of care because you are paying to stay in their hotel or motel. These people, we're paying them to get us from point A to point B, and we have the right to be safe and know that we're safe from point A to point B, and the obligation would be upon them to make sure that we're safe. And they do that with liability, but they also need to do it with uninsured motorists instead of having people out here who are injured and may not have health insurance, may be set behind just for riding in a vehicle across town that was hit by a drunk driver or uninsured motorist.
Mr. Chairman, could we go out of session again? I think the
Yes,
the
we
guest
will.
had
We will.
I think he had a question on the-
Considering
or a
time,
comment.
considering the time and the number of members who still want to ask questions or make a comment, kindly let's be brief, but we will go out of session and allow Mr. Messina to answer back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one point to clarify here, because it is being discussed at length. It is not necessarily the case that the driver's own uninsured motorist coverage would not apply just because the driver is driving with a transportation company. The driver may still have an applicable coverage, and I think that's important to keep in mind here. In addition to that, the rider may have their own applicable uninsured motorist coverage, which would not be excluded. It wouldn't be removed just because they're sitting in an Uber. In fact, the vast majority of personal policies would still apply in that case. So I think it's just really important to keep in mind the subset of claims here that we're talking about. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Messina? Chairman Terry?
Thank you, and appreciate you coming. I just need to, this was something that was brought up in a question that I had actually had in my office. So I just want to clarify, and this goes back to, you know, free will. You have the free will to get into the Uber, the Lyft, the rideshare company. You also have the free will to buy your own insurance. And with that, you could get uninsured motorist on your own insurance. And then what I've heard today is that you would be covered in that event. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And then the point being brought up that 40% of college students may not have insurance or may not have a driver's license. But that, my understanding with the Affordable Care Act, up to age 26, they could be on their parents' health insurance plan that could cover an accident as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Messina, it seems that $5,000 in coverage is really very, very puny. Considering the medical expenses in this day and age, 50,000 really doesn't seem to be a whole lot either. You have a feeling about that?
I do. You know, we spent a lot of time looking at this insurance coverage and looking at the claims and loss history that I was mentioning. And the fact is that it just doesn't arise with nearly enough frequency to justify that type of insurance. And the fact is that's just an expense that would be passed along to the consumer. And nobody wants to make prices any higher on the riders or drivers within your state.
Well,
now, when you look at that $5,000, I understand that that limit might appear small, but again, the fact is that it covers the vast majority of claims.
well, thank you. You have questions for Mr. Messina, or do you want to speak on the bill? On the bill. So we'll go back into session. We are in session. On my list, I have Chairman Spicky. Thank you. Chairman White?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A wild thought. Is a party wagon on Broadway considered a TNC?
Thank you, Mr.
Representative
Chairman. No, this is very specific as to this title is very specific as to ride shares, which are Uber and Lyft.
So they would have their own,
Chairman White,
so they would have their own liability insurance, that group.
you recognize.
Correct, Chairman.
Thank you.
Representative Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, to say this doesn't or couldn't occur that often, I think is a little misleading. The ride sharing industry is worth an estimated $61 billion. About 25% of the entire U.S. population uses ride sharing at least once a month. Uber alone has 3.8 million drivers. The ride sharing market value is expected to increase to $220 billion by 2025. I don't think this bill is asking for anything except level playing field with what the taxi cab industry has to provide for the safety of the public. I mean, and with the market share that ride sharing is doing currently, I think it just makes good sense for us to protect the public.
Thank you. Chairman Powers?
Thank you. And I agree with so many things that you're saying and what Uber's saying too. I really think I think this is something we really need to work on and look at as far as, you know, what other states are doing and try to come up. And I know you had an amendment and we took it off, but I think there needs to be some kind of a work through on this. And what I'd like to do, and I'd like to come back really and have a true summer study and look at this and try to figure out which way we need to go and how much we need to add. I mean, you know, maybe that's not even enough what we're talking about. Maybe we need to look at another figure or whatever, because there's so many different variables in here, like they were talking about a minute ago, that people that don't have, that they're not on an auto policy, they wouldn't be covered on an uninsured motorist claim. So I think there's some things that we really need to work through, and I really think we need to do a summer study. So I would like to make a motion to do that and work on it over the summer and come back with a solution next year.
We have a motion and a second. We are, I think he has to respond. It is a debatable motion. And considering that, Representative Beck, do you want to enter the debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really confused because any good insurance agent would recommend that you have uninsured motorists. My insurance agent always reminds me to make sure that I have uninsured motorists. It is almost malpractice on the point of an insurance agent not to make sure that you have uninsured motorists. Because, ladies and gentlemen, even though we require insurance out there, there's thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of people running around without insurance. We don't, this is a very simple bill. If we want to study afterwards that if we've put enough responsibility on common carriers, which I don't think this is enough for common carriers, but I can't imagine an insurance agent saying, don't buy uninsured motorists in the great state of Tennessee. Don't do it. You know, it's used very seldom, but boy, when it's used, you could have tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills and need that coverage, but don't do it. And, you know, I don't know why we would, it's very simple. I don't know why we would need a summer study.
Chairman Powers.
Yeah, and that's not, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I would never tell anybody not to carry it. I would never do that. I'm just saying right now, the state law says that you don't have to carry it. You know, there is no state law that says you have to carry uninsured motorists. So that's why another reason I think that we need to work on it over the summer, because we're trying to mandate to a company to do something that's not a state law. I mean, we're trying to tell them that you have to do this, and it's not a state law that you have to do it. So maybe that's something we need to look at as maybe changing the state law to require it. So, thank you.
The
You're recognized.
state law requires you to waive it. These people getting into their vehicles are not knowingly waiving anything. They need to be covered. Those young people who don't have a policy, who can't go back on anybody, are expecting to be safe in their vehicles. They're not. A drunk driver hits them. Here's your $5,000. Have a nice day. It just is, it's wrong. It's just wrong.
Members, any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we are voting on the summer study motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed? No. The bill does move on to summer study.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Thank you. Pass this on. The last item on our agenda is House Bill 2855. That'll be presented by me, so Vice Chair Rudder will have the gavel.
We are now on item number 6, House Bill 2855 by Chairman Kumar. Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I do have an amendment 14116.
We want to go ahead and you want to explain the motion, or do we're going to go ahead and put the motion on the bill? Do I have a motion? Second. Amendment number 014116 is now on the, we have to vote on it. Okay. Okay, we're going to vote on amendment number 014116. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The amendment goes on the bill. Now, Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you. Members, this is a bill that applies the prudent layperson standard to a medical emergency. That is that if a person believes in their best judgment that they have a medical emergency and they go to the emergency room for care, coverage will be provided by the insurer, regardless of the fact that the final diagnosis may not be what the person thought they had. They may have thought that they were having a heart attack and it was only indigestion. So final diagnosis will have no bearing on insurance coverage. Prior authorization will have no bearing, or any contractual agreements between the provider and the insurance company will not have any bearing. So if a person genuinely believes that, and a layperson would think that they have a medical emergency and they go to seek treatment, they will get coverage for that condition. With that, members and Madam Chair, I renew my motion.
Do we have any questions for our sponsor? Seeing none, we're ready to vote on House Bill 2855. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Moves on to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. If there is no further business, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. We stand adjourned.